Welcome back to Talk of the Town. I'm Steve Noxon, your host, and now on the phone is my next guest. This is State Senator Rob Sampson. Senator Sampson, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Steve. Glad to join you.
Always a pleasure to have you on, sir. I know this is something that's near and dear to your heart. You're a real Second Amendment advocate and a defender. And there's a bill that has been proposed in Hartford to impose a 35% tax on ammunition. And I personally think that this is crazy because the last thing you want to do is make it harder for people to practice and be able to keep their skills up when it comes to using firearms. But who proposed this bill and what is the purpose?
You are absolutely right. Crazy is a good word for it. I've been calling it madness all week, so more or less the same thing. It was proposed by Representative Jillian Gilchrist, who is the state representative from the town of West Hartford. And I believe she's in her first or second term. And she proposed a similar bill last cycle, actually, except then the tax was 50%.
So now it's...
Yeah, can you believe that? 50%.
Well, so now it's going to be easier to handle. Oh, only 35%? Wow, it's a discount.
Yeah, it's so funny because at the public hearing, I had the opportunity to question her about it, and I mistakenly said 25%, and she corrected me. No, 35%. I'm like, oh.
Wow, that's just...
Clearly, this is a political statement that she's trying to make. And it certainly was when she did it at 50%, and I think it's still a political statement more than a legitimate bill. But it's something we should be concerned about because the one difference between this time and the last time is that she held a press conference announcing putting this bill forward, and she was joined by the two major gun control groups in the state, Connecticut Against Gun Violence and Moms Demand Action. But one other person was standing right beside her at this press conference, and that was the House Majority Leader, the second most powerful man in the House of Representatives, and that was State Representative Matt Ritter from Hartford, who is the Democrat House Majority Leader. And if he's standing there supporting this effort, you've got to take it a little more seriously, like they actually want to see this become law.
Now, I don't purchase ammunition, but isn't it possible to buy it online from out of state? Or are there laws prohibiting that?
It is possible to buy ammunition online. I don't know what the set of circumstances is in Connecticut because Connecticut, I believe, is the only state that requires something called an ammunition certificate to purchase ammunition, which is another absurdity in our state law.
Right.
Another crazy gun control thing that will not do anything to counteract or combat any kind of violence. I mean, ammunition is useless without a firearm. And I used to be able to have, a friend or, my mom or whoever, hey, if you're going by Walmart, would you grab me some ammo?
Yeah.
Can't do that anymore. Now you've got to have an ammunition certificate or a pistol permit to buy ammunition, and it's just absurd. Criminals are not getting their guns or their ammunition from the store.
Yeah, well, that's the amazing thing about it is, all of these laws, whenever they talk about these things, are not going to have any impact at all on people who are going to want to use firearms for illegal purposes.
It's actually far worse and even more insidious than that, Steve. She says that the reason why she put this bill in is that the very fact that anyone owns a firearm means that they are creating gun violence for the rest of us. That's her opinion.
What?
And she put that in her public hearing testimony, and I asked her point blank why she put the bill in, and that's what she said. She says, because all of you people that own firearms are the cause for gun violence, because we own firearms. And ultimately, even if they were purchased lawfully, there is a chance that they will end up in the hands of criminals and be used for, negative purposes. That's like the most ridiculous thing on earth. That's like it's blaming, drunk driving on,
on the car.
Owning a vehicle. Yeah. It's like that's a pretty strong leap.
Well, why not ban sharp knives?
Right.
I mean,
used for something.
They're absurd. That's absurd. And again, this attempt to take away people's right to defend themselves because there are bad actors out there using these I think it just totally misses the point. We have a caller that calls this show regularly that talks about, if we increase the crimes or increase the penalties for people who engage in illegal activity with guns, such as buying or selling guns illegally, using them in commission of a crime, if we increase the penalties for those things astronomically, that might go somewhere as far as clamping down on illegal use of firearms. But just putting a new imposition on a legal firearm owner and user is insane.
Yeah, Steve, I completely agree. But to be honest, we don't even need to do that. All we need to do is actually prosecute the criminals that we have. That's the most shocking statistics. I wish I knew we would be talking about that, because I would have actually had that stuff in front of me. But if you start actually analyzing the amount of prosecutions for violent crimes, theft with a firearm, et cetera, in this state, and discover that they are prosecuted at such ridiculously low levels, it's really shocking. And, of course, this whole thing is disingenuous anyway. She says that she wants to use the money for, quote-unquote, evidence-based, programs to fight gun violence. That's just nonsense. At the press conference, she alluded to giving the money to the gun control groups, Connecticut Against Gun Violence. I mean, they're not going to do anything except for try and pass more gun control. What I have done every year is actually try and pass legislation that would make a difference. I'm sure we've talked about this before, but when that terrible tragedy happened in Sandy Hook, immediately following that, there was a ton of gun control passed in Connecticut. And most of it is terrible nonsense that is just affecting law-abiding citizens and not doing anything positive to fight gun violence, if you want to use that term. But one thing that they did that was good is they created this program called the Statewide Firearms Trafficking Task Force. It's just a program that allows law enforcement officials from the cities and towns across our state to communicate with each other to track the sale or trafficking of stolen firearms. Like if somebody robs a house in Cheshire, they have the serial numbers for those guns. So they put that out to the task force. And if that gun shows up at a pawn shop in Hartford, or it shows up in another crime in Hartford, they have a little bit of evidence to start tracking where these guns are coming from and how they're moving about the state. To me, that's something that could be effective, because almost all violence that is done with firearms happens in our major cities as a result of stolen firearms. So that's where you ought to concentrate your efforts, not putting taxes on bullets. The thing is, I put this amendment forward. I put the bill in every year, but of course I don't even get a hearing. And I've tried to do it as an amendment, and I did it last year on the Senate floor on the bill about ghost guns. And of course, every Democrat voted against my amendment. So that shows just how disingenuous it is that they're actually concerned about this issue.
Now, while the inner cities, and she's this representative from West Hartford, as you mentioned, many of those people might support, many of those representatives and senators might support it. But if you talk to some of the representatives from around in the more rural areas here in Connecticut, are they also in support of this? Because I know that people who are living in these rural areas, they like to hunt, they target shoot, they trap shoot, whatever they're doing, and they're not really that much of a threat with the weapons that they're using. How are they feeling about this? I mean, are you getting any support from anybody on the Democrat side to push back against this?
I know that there are some Democrat legislators that have been challenged on this issue and say that they do not support it. Although between you and me, I think if this bill ever makes it to a vote on the floor of the House or Senate, I think it would be very hard for any Democrats to vote no. I really do. Steve, you know as well as I do just how divided our country is, and just how far out of touch the Connecticut Democratic Party has become. When I first got elected back in 2011, there were a few moderate legislators hanging around up there, but they're all gone. Anyone that's calling themselves a Democrat in the Connecticut General Assembly has got the same policies as Bernie Sanders. These people are out and out socialists. They want to eliminate all firearms, and they want to have control over every aspect of our lives and our finances. Some of them are in more moderate districts, more purple districts, so they have to be careful about what they say and do. But I will tell you, they are pretty much in lockstep. Used to be you'd get a handful of, Democrats to vote against the big gun control measures, but in the last several years, they all vote for them.
What are the chances this holds up if it were to be challenged in court?
That's a good question. I mean, there is an existing excise tax on ammunition and firearms that exists on the federal level. But what's funny about that excise tax is a result of a desire based on hunters and sportsmen to create money for conservation efforts. And it was done, I don't know exactly what year that was. I want to say it was in the 30s or something like that bill passed. So there is a precedent. Although I do believe that this bill is unconstitutional in other ways. They're talking about making it so only citizens have to pay the tax, but law enforcement officials would not. I think you have an equal protection issue there. And it's the Second Amendment, so it could be construed to be a restriction on the Second Amendment. I see it that way. I don't believe that there should be any additional fees or charges associated with the purchase of a firearm or ammunition at all.
Yeah, again, it strikes me as really disingenuous when you're talking about trying to reduce gun violence and make guns safer and things like that, and then you say, okay, if someone legally purchases a gun and wants to go to a target range and practice and get their skill sets up so that they can, if need be, defend themselves or someone else, it's going to be far more expensive for them to go through that training and to keep their skill set, up to speed. That just it seems to fly in the face of what they really want to accomplish, at least as far as what they're saying they want to accomplish.
Their goal is quite clear, Steve. They want to get rid of firearms. They want to make it so it is illegal for any private citizen to own a firearm. That's what they want, and I don't even know if that's a secret anymore. It used to be they would hide that under the cover of, clever gun control measures like this one. But I think if you asked Representative Gilchrist, I think she'd say the world would be a much better place if we banned all firearms. I doubt she would even argue that point. They make no bones about it. That's what they want. They don't want anyone owning firearms, and any deterrent is a good thing in their eyes.
It's madness. I mean, first of all, you can't uninvent a gun. We just had this tragic shooting out I think it was in Michigan, at the Coors bottling plant. And it turned out that the guy who did the shooting made his own gun. So he didn't even bother buying a gun. He didn't bother having to get a license or get a background check or any of this stuff. So all these laws they put in place are so easily bypassed by anybody who just is intent upon breaking the law. More laws aren't going to solve this problem.
Yep, you're speaking my language. I agree with you completely. But then again, you and I are actually people with common sense and have an understanding of history and
human nature,
how the world works. I mean, these folks, they live in an alternate universe. They think that they can change anything by passing laws. They can stop climate change by passing a law. I mean, they think anything is possible as long as they say so. It's a sickness, and they are completely, absolutely, utterly, after a change in this country as a whole. They want to change our system of government. That's why they're undermining our American history. They want to paint the founders as if they're all racist and bigots. They're trying to undermine anything good about the American founding and the principles and values that are associated with it for that purpose. And that's why we have to make sure we stand up and we remind people about the beauty and glory of America and why freedom and opportunity is better than socialism in every case, because they're going to keep coming. They're not going to stop.
No, and they've proven that. I mean, even just this bill that they want to ban the 3D printed guns. It's like, okay, so now you're talking about banning a process. Okay, that's insane. And how are you going to enforce that? You make it illegal, so what?
They actually, the bill is actually much worse than that. You're referring to the ghost gun law that was passed last year. If you look on YouTube, you can search up Rob Sampson ghost guns, and you can listen to the debate. And I think any person with any common sense would find it completely shocking. I got them to acknowledge that the giant boulder that is at the end of my driveway, it's a big old rock, could be a ghost gun. Because the argument is that any piece of metal, if the person who owns it has the intent to turn it into a firearm, now it is a ghost gun, therefore illegal. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's just that's nuts. I mean, there's already laws in place that say you can't manufacture a gun without a serial number, right? I mean, that law exists. So why do we need additional laws over and above that?
I don't know if that law existed prior to this, to the ghost guns law, but it didn't need to, because people that make their own firearms in general are, craftsmen that are doing it, as a hobby, or like in the case out in the Coors, brewery issue or Coors factory, they're complete criminals anyway who were never going to follow such a law.
Right.
So having it doesn't make a whole lot of difference anyway.
Yeah. No, it's just they pass these laws and it's like, how are you going to enforce the law? Like the one that says, it's illegal to leave your gun out on a table if it's, it has to be locked up when you're at home. How do you enforce that? I mean, obviously something happens where the police have to come in and they see it. Well, then they have it. But other than that, it's dumb. I mean,
right. Yeah. There was somebody recently, a couple of weeks ago, that they were burglarized at their home, and when the police came, they told them that they had a gun in their nightstand or whatever, and they arrested the person, because they were improperly storing their firearms.
Yeah, well, because having it in a locked box in the middle of the night when you absolutely need it is, perfect. Where else should it be besides in a very difficult to get into locked box? It's craziness. Well, Rob, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, and keep up the good fight on this one. Let us know how this proceeds, and if there's anything anybody can do, obviously contact your representatives if you're against this, because they need to know, how people feel about things like this. And I think, again, it's an intrusion, and it's a violation of our rights.
You're absolutely right. And they're coming in every way, shape, and form. It's always the same thing. It's a supposed public safety or public health issue, which is very important now that we're talking about coronavirus and vaccines. Keep in mind, anytime the government is talking about public safety or public health, watch out for your rights.
Yep. Appreciate your time. State Senator Rob Sampson. Always a pleasure to speak with you, sir, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Steve.
Take care, sir.